speaking of winding down, aren't we moving to the fiscal cliff? What's our next subject?
Well, the fiscal cliff is approaching on January 1st.
What's a fiscal cliff?
Well, there is no real, it's really just a misnomer. There's no such thing as a fiscal cliff, really, because really what it is, it's a slow, painful death, really, more than a cliff.
A slow, painful death?
It's more like a slow, painful death.
Is this Marquis de Sade, Marquis de Sade someplace, and we're being put to death by some kind of weapon?
No,
some heated oil? Or I don't know. What are you talking
it's not
about?
really, what it is, okay, so if you have the tax increases, which
which tax increases?
Well, they want to do some tax increases.
Who does?
Well, it's kind of been programmed into a.
You talking about sequester?
Yeah, it was kind of programmed into.
Pre-programmed.
It was programmed into something. It was kind of kicking the can down the road once again. And
kicking the can.
Yeah.
Wait a minute? Who's kicking the can?
The Congress and the executive branch kicked the can down the road.
I understand Congress passed multiple tax bills, but it's always been in the Senate where the Senate Democrats refuse to even bring up the tax bills because they're afraid the Democrats will even vote for them. Isn't that what's going on here?
Well, we haven't had a budget for 4 years, but who needs a budget?
Isn't that Harry Reid?
Budget, smudge it. I mean, who needs a budget?
Oh, okay. I understand.
We haven't had a budget.
We don't need a budget.
Okay, but the fiscal cliff means that if you're making $10,000 a year, your federal taxes go up 55%. If you're making $25,000 a year or $15,000, you go up 39%. Making $25,000 a year goes up 5.5%. $35,000 a year goes up 42%. Making $150,000 a year goes up 20%. And if you're making $1 million or more, it's about 24% increase.
Well,
so
I got wait a minute. Hang on. Okay, let's break this down a little bit because there are a wide series of taxes that you're kind of covering there. One is if you allow the Bush tax cuts, which actually 90% of the Bush tax cuts affect the middle class. If you allow those to go away, that is what I understand the main focus of the Democrats, allow the Bush tax cuts to go away, and then to increase taxes on the alleged 1%.
I think it's 2% now.
Or 2% now.
20%
yeah, right.
or 100%.
Well, isn't it true the top 10% pay like 70% of all taxes anyway in the country?
Well, I think what happens.
Well, wait a minute. Isn't that true? Isn't the
what
10%
happens?
pay?
There's not that much money in the 2%. So if you're going to increase revenue, you've got to tax the middle class. That's just the way it goes.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Okay, so what that's where the Bush tax cuts actually affect the middle class. Almost 90% of the Bush tax cuts are going to affect the middle class, whereas at 10% of the Bush tax cuts, those are the evil part. So aren't the Democrats trying to say they want to keep the Bush tax cuts for everybody except the top 10%?
It's not really clear. I mean, there's no really such thing as a tax cut. People earn their money. This is a tax increase.
Well, no. It's allowing the tax breaks to go to sunset, and so that the new taxes would go back to the rate, including the payroll tax, which is going to go back because the payroll tax has been cut now for many years. The unemployment tax, that's going to go up. Paying for unemployment is going to go up. I mean, the cost and the people eligible. So these are all new taxes, or I should say new monies that are related to taxes that are going to just naturally grow out on January 1st unless something is done.
Well, there'll be a massive tax increase. And the idea
And who will that affect?
Well, it affects everyone, but mainly the middle class.
It don't affect anyone that doesn't pay taxes.
Well, there are people who aren't paying taxes now who will.
I understand there's a 40%, 47% number that allegedly don't pay any
but
taxes.
I'm saying that $10,000 a year, they're not paying any. They're going to go up quite a bit. There's some people who will go up that they weren't paying any taxes before, and they will pay. For example, if you're, let's see, like say if you're a couple and you're making $25,000 a year, you used to get a refund of $15. Now you'll pay $1,400. So some people
That's a huge jump.
So some people, who weren't paying anything before will now pay more.
Wait a minute, you're not even equating in the Affordable Care Act taxes, the 21 taxes that are going to go in on the Affordable Care Act starting on January 1st.
Well, no,
you know that the IRS hired 16,000 new investigators.
That's a separate. That's a separate issue. But if you start looking at the overall thing, okay, what they want to do, what the government does. It used to be we had it was like, okay, we had the people had a government, but now the government is kind of its own. It runs on its own. It's got its own momentum. And when the government says, like, how can we afford if we don't raise taxes. Okay, so this is the argument. How can the government not afford to raise taxes? Because we need all this money.
Well, wait a minute. You realize raising taxes, the growth of the national product is going to be suppressed. And I understand now we have about 2% growth of the natural income of the company.
What the analyst said, this would be about a negative 4%. So if you have a 1.5, that puts us down, whatever, 2.53 or whatever.
Well, wait a minute. But the idea has always been shown, most economists do believe, and unfortunately this is contrary to what's being sold to us, most economists believe if you lower taxes, it generates more income for the government because there are more people willing to invest in new companies, new personnel.
But you're missing the point entirely.
Wait a minute, I'm missing the point
You're missing the point entirely. Okay.
So if you raise taxes, why would people invest?
But you're missing the point entirely. Let's say you move... Okay, you want to move 1.6 trillion over, right? From the private to the government sector, right? And then you've also got 40 billion a month that you're printing, blah blah blah. So when that comes to 4 times 12, you've got a trillion or two there. So really, you're moving 3 or 4 trillion. Okay, like your gross national product's a trillion or so. So you're moving a couple trillion. Basically everything you make is being moved from the private sector into the government sector, which is good because. First of all,
why is that good?
Because the private sector doesn't know how to spend the money.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, now we're talking about this is where the monetary redistribution comes into play. I got it. So that means all the people that have equity and monies and the ability to hire people should now just give the money to the government.
Well, they're not
and
giving
somehow or another, all those people that don't pay taxes anyway are now going to be on a dole. So that number is going to go from 47% up to 90%?
No, they're not.
Where's my dole check?
No, but they're not giving it to them. That's confiscated.
Oh, they're not giving it to them. Well, that's why they have unemployment for up to 10 years now?
No, they're not. No, but the people who are the tax increase are not giving it to the government. It's being confiscated by the government.
Confiscated?
They have no choice.
Well, but the point is, it's not being given. It's being taken.
It's being confiscated under a threat of force. So anyway, but what you have is
under a threat of force.
Sure.
Whose force?
The government's force.
I mean, they're going to march in and take my bank?
Well, they'll just take you.
They'll just take you.
So, but the point is, as you move from the private sector, like say you have your how much you're making in the private sector, that funds the government. So let's say you're making $6 trillion a year. Let's say our GDP is like 6 or 7 trillion a year. Costs $1.5 trillion to run the government, right? Well, let's say we move like that to 4 or 5 or 5 or 6, and so basically everything we make in the private sector goes to the government. That way, the government controls. There's no more real private property because the private property was being mishandled.
This is the redistribution because even if all the richest people in the country gave 100% of what they own, it would not cover the national debt even for 20 days. That's the problem here.
But I mean, that's only if you kill them. If you take most of what they take all the time, then you can just
but why do you work then? Why would you want to work? What's your incentive to work if 90% of your income's taken?
Well,
what is your incentive?
What's your choice? What else are you going to do?
Well, I'll tell you what your choice is. You have to file a lawsuit against somebody.